Well, talking of security, I'm delighted to be joined on the programme now by security expert Will Geddes. Will, hello, good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. I mean, we do really need some of your expertise and experience in this field to help us decipher what really sounds like a chaotic kind of a cataclysmic series of events, which, thank goodness, did not end in catastrophe, but which Harry and Meghan are saying could have done very easily. So I know you're only interpreting, and I know you're only, giving a view on this, but what do you think might have happened?
Well, a couple of things, Vanessa, and again, I don't know the fine detail of what the security plan was, but from my view, it doesn't look as though it was a very good security plan.
No.
This falls under what we would professionally call journey management. So it's how you move a principal from one location to another, and you consider, obviously, within that plan, what are the sort of risks you're going to face. Now, I've taken a lot of very, very big name people in the public eye through New York. I know it's a challenge. It's a lot harder than, for example, in London, where you've got lots of windy roads. Obviously, New York, like many major US cities, is on a grid system. So for paparazzi to follow you, it's quite easy. However, the security plan, from what I saw, them driving around for an hour and 15, that is not going to shake the paparazzi, certainly not in my experience. And that would seem to me, and the only conclusion I can speculate, is that they were confused and they didn't know really what to do.
What would you have recommended? I've already said to Sarah twice now that if you've got this ghastly and terrifying spectre of your mother meeting her end as a result of a car chase, you would think that the thing you would want your security team to do, and that you would yourself want to do, would be to extract yourself from any vestige of a chase at all. So what would you do? Would you pull over and simply park up? Or would you drive very slowly, observing the speed limit in the slow lane and just let them overtake you, or whatever it is? Or would you drive to a police station and just stop? I have no idea, because I don't work in security, what you would advise your clients to do. Were they in a similar position to Meghan and Harry?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpick there, Vanessa, and
Yes.
I'll start off with the fact that in New York, unlike here in the United Kingdom, you can actually hire members of the NYPD when they're not on duty. And this is perfectly legitimate. It's not them moonlighting. You can actually engage them to help you with your security. Now, if you are able to do that, you can utilize, obviously, all the powers that they have as police officers to your advantage. And that can be, for example, to intercept paparazzi, or certainly to block and delay them. The second thing is also in terms of the route. Going from the particular venue back to what they want to be an undisclosed location on the Upper East Side, from what I understand, then you can use what we call wash areas. And that can be, for example, to have an agreement, as my company does with many of the big end and smart five-star hotels in Manhattan. You actually take the principals into that hotel, which would appear to the paparazzi that they're staying there, but you move them out the back into another vehicle and move them from there to another location. And you may have a number of wash areas if you've got someone who is really under risk. Now, these two are obviously of interest, particularly for sort of celebrity and showbiz status, rather than necessarily a specific threat, unless there is one, and there may very well be one. I am only speculating after all. But you can move them in the same way as you would someone who was under a very, very serious threat.
One of the factors of this story that we do know is that they ended up being driven along in a yellow New York taxi. We think that they got into it at a police precinct. So they must have got out of the SUV and got into this taxi. And you will be able to explain why and how and what the point of that could have been.
Well, it's a fantastic plan. And that's the one thing that I would commend the security team for doing. That is, if it was their yellow cab, they didn't just get one. Hopefully they had one prepared. We do this a lot in London. If you want someone not to be followed, you put them in a black cab, and there are a lot of private individuals, Andrew Lloyd Webber, the King of Jordan, who have their own private black cabs, so they can slide into the traffic and be very, very difficult to detect. It's almost like a shell game. You can move them around in amongst various other taxis. Very, very difficult for paparazzi to potentially follow. So using a yellow cab is an excellent plan. And it would be something that I would have prepared certainly for a wash station, as I was mentioning earlier. Move them in the Escalade or the Tucson or the Tahoe, or whatever it was that they went from the venue and they look smart getting into. Move them into something like a yellow cab, which can then bleed into the regular populace, obviously, to get them to their ultimate destination.
Fascinating. We needed you, Will, to explain that part. Now, I've got a quote here from Omid Scobie. He's a friend of Meghan and Harry's. He seems to be the source through which they disseminate the information that they want everybody to know. And this is what he says. Despite being confronted by uniformed police multiple times, the paparazzi's cars continued their pursuit in trying to follow the Sussexes and Doria to the private residence they were staying at. Traffic violations by the drivers include driving on a sidewalk, going through red lights, reversing down a one-way street, driving while photographing, and illegally blocking a moving vehicle. A source close to the Sussexes say Harry, Meghan and Doria are understandably shaken, but thankful that everyone's safe. I don't know, Will, whether that strikes you as just a pretty routine level of kind of infringements or whether this strikes you as very dangerous and potentially catastrophic.
It's to me, having worked and lived in New York for a while, Vanessa, I know that it would be very difficult to do a lot of those things, particularly on one journey, without it drawing an awful lot of attention. And if there were NYPD officers, and this is again why they should have beefed up that team of NYPD officers who could actually arrest them for carrying out many of those infractions. But yes, it's not unheard of for the paparazzi to break the law. I mean, one of the tricks I used to use in LA for a couple of principals would be to time it perfectly that the lights were just changing as we'd move through. The paparazzi would have to jump the lights, which would result generally in a $50 fine. Once you've done that 2 or 3 times, they realize that the money they're going to get for the pictures is probably a great deal less than what they're actually accumulating in fines. So they will break the law from time to time. But again, this is where in New York, it would be kind of difficult, particularly if there were a lot of pedestrians, as there generally are in Manhattan, but also if you had NYPD officers who could arrest accordingly.
Thank you very much indeed, Will Geddes. Very interesting. Great person to get, don't you think? An excellent guest who really understands what's going on here. So the yellow taxi idea was a great idea.